Welcome to my presentation about overcoming challenges when supporting deaf students. This comes from a period of reflection over the past 2 years in working with 2 deaf students. The presentation is going to look at working with deaf students, teaching scenarios, online glossaries, keeping language simple, and web links. Firstly, looking at working with deaf students. Signers do need breaks, so don't imagine you can drive on through a long lecture when someone's signing. The guides to good practice have very good ideas and ways of working with deaf students and signers. It's important it's not just you and the deaf student, you have to remember the signer as well. This is a document from the Wolverhampton University about teaching deaf students, and there's a guide for art and design students and also for students of science and engineering. We do need to make sure the deaf support unit knows what you are doing, so you can organise a signer as well as a student. A module handbook for signer and deaf support unit will help them to know when you need support. You may or may not get the same signer each week, so it is best to make sure you are prepared with materials a new one may need each week. Learning support materials. In sessions it's important to have a handout for the signer so they can read and have an overview of what you're going to do. This could even include a lesson plan if you're going to do group work and things like that. Deaf students do like to use VLEs, virtual learning environments, and do access online materials. Often they're the first to sign up or access these materials. So it's important to work with and support your signers to do their job. A key aspect I found on reflection is that working with and supporting a deaf student does take more work for a module. It's work that in some cases benefits other students, but you do need to be aware of this when running a module. Room organisation. The learning environment itself can make a significant difference to the challenges facing a deaf student. The challenges are very much your challenges rather than the students or signers, so you have to make the right adaptations. The next series of slides illustrates some of these aspects that have occurred in my teaching over the past 2 years. In a standard lecture room format, the lecturer might be facing a row of students, whether in a small or large lecture theatre. You will then have the interpreter alongside you. And also you need to make sure the deaf student is in a position to see the interpreter. My preference is for having the interpreter and student on the left, but other people might like other arrangements. If you're using a data projector, instantly if it's in the centre or centre of the room with your computer on one side, that's fine for me, but not necessarily for a student and certainly not for the interpreter. What I have tried is putting the computer on the other side, and this means that the interpreter can actually see the screen, because if they're looking to the front like me, they can't see what's behind them, and they can't keep on turning around to see what you're doing on the screen behind them. It's fine for deaf student or the other students, but not for the interpreter. Another teaching scenario that's difficult is the tutorial setup. Obviously the student needs to be able to see the interpreter, but somehow you need to make sure there's some cohesion as the students trying to work within the tutorial group. So you have to be careful that any students who are speaking in the tutorial, that the interpreter can hear them, they can then sign for the student, and the deaf student also get involved in the conversation within the tutorial setup. Similarly, if the student's working in, say, a buzz group with other students, you need to make sure those other students are aware of the needs of the deaf students, that they should actually not all talk at once. One person talks at a time, and for them to remember that once they've spoken something, the interpreter needs to sign it so the student can understand it. So it takes a while for the students to work out how to do this. Once they actually get into this scenario and they get used to it, they will involve the deaf student quite well. Another situation one-on-one with a student is if a lecturer is supporting a student using a computer. Obviously, if they're looking at a computer screen, they can't see you. So you need to work out an agreed sequence with the student. What I tend to do is I'm going to say what I'm going to do, I demonstrate it, then I ask for feedback from the student. So while I'm talking, they're watching me so they can lip read. Then I do the same thing on screen, silently, so they don't need to hear me. And then once that's done, I ask for feedback from the student to make sure they understood what I've done on screen. Another strange scenario not many people come across is in teaching in a darkroom, working with safe lights, for example, to show printing techniques. There might well not be enough light for the student to see the signer or your lips to lip read. That may seem a strange situation, but it's also true if lights are dim for a data projector. So you may need to provide a light for the signer's hands. And don't forget, if you are using a DVD with the data projector, to use the subtitles. Demonstrations. If you have a group of students looking at you demonstrating, do try to make sure you repeat at least once so a deaf student can see what you said and then watch you demonstrate it. You do need to make sure the student can see their signer, especially when there's a gaggle of students kind of clustering around you trying to demonstrate a piece of equipment or materials. A very useful thing that's now online are glossaries. These glossaries have been created by signers and deaf students to create a uniform range of signs for art and design, science, engineering and the built environment. These are designed to enhance communication of concepts in education. They're sciencescience.ac.uk and engineeringscience.acu.uk and artscience.ac.uk. For example, this one is from Art Science, and you can see the entry web screen, and from that you can actually type in a search term and find any words. In this case I'll be looking for learning style. It'll come back with a small video clip for a student to actually see with a signer and see what the signing is for learning style. So they are learning style. Similarly, this is the site about anatomy from Science Signs. Here's the word for anatomy. If lecturers are online beforehand, students and signer can meet to look at and agree what signs mean for words that are going to be used in a lecture using the online glossaries. Students and signers do use these glossary sites, so the more help in advance of vocabulary through lecture notes or terminology materials, the better. It's important if you keep your language simple, so you should always think before you speak. Some words may have to be spelled out by the signer. See how long it takes you to understand a word spelled out letter by letter. E-X-P-L-O-S-I-O-N. Explosion. It takes longer. Sometimes you need to be aware of the signer out of the corner of your eye and avoid talking too fast. So try to pause and think about what you're saying and how you say it. The signer has to listen to your sentence before signing it, as the grammatical construction is different. So you should try to keep your sentences short. Make sure you leave them enough time for them to be able to finish signing. Otherwise, they're listening to you and signing your last sentence. A very difficult thing to do. Reusing learning materials. Ask yourself, are they inclusive? Are the sentences too complex for you to use without changing? This should be done before starting a lecture. Otherwise, you'll be trying to shorten sentences as you read or go through your slides. This is not easy. Also, it may confuse students as they read something and you're saying something different. Avoid complex language. The Deaf Support Unit found this useful link and passed on to me. I'm not quite sure this is a subtle hint, but it's about simplifying relative clause sentences. And this is from the Supporting English Acquisition website. For example, a relative clause like, a strength of digital photography is a degree of control it gives photographers. A possible simplification is, digital photography gives photographers a lot of control. This control is a strength of digital photography. It is key to make sessions inclusive, so it's important you work out the best way to support the end user, either the student. After all, it's not your lecture, it's their lecture. So plan and prepare in advance. Make sure you, the deaf student, interpreter and the note taker work together. This is very much your role, not theirs. Here on the web page are a number of links to resources: www.deafandcreative.ac.uk, Royal National Institute for the Deaf, and the other science signs, engineering signs and art signs websites. There are also good links in the university to support and advisory services. This includes some support for deaf students and useful links for you to look at. I'd like to thank two deaf students, Leanne Murphy and Anthony Martin, and to all the signers who've worked with us over the past 2 years, and also staff in the deaf support unit, especially Sharon Stevenson. If you'd like to contact me, my details are d.bryson@derby.ac.uk, and my personal website is www.cladonia.co.uk. Many thanks.